Hey there everyone, it's me, elmoviemaster. I wanted to do a video talking about movies that I like that everyone else hates. A few years ago, I did a video that was titled Movies That I Hate That Everyone Else Likes. And that video has a lot of views, has a lot of comments. Thank you guys for the comments and the views. I'm very, very grateful. Someone in the comments section mentioned, where's the other video? By that meaning, movies that I like that everyone else hates. I never made it, and so here's that video. So, mind you, all the movies that I'm about to mention, I don't think any of them are great. I think most of them are okay, average at best, but I will admit that I probably have seen most of these movies probably more than once, and if they're playing on TV, I'll probably watch them. So I don't hate any of these movies, but I also don't think they're amazing. So starting off the list, we're going to go with number 15. Number 15 is a movie that came out in 2013 that I saw in theaters and I actually liked. And I watch this movie not all the time, but if it's playing on TV, I'll watch it. And that movie is A Good Day to Die Hard. Yes, this is the worst movie in the Die Hard franchise. I admit that. But I can't get myself to hate it. Yes, Bruce Willis looks bored. Yes, the character played by his son is not a very good actor. He's been in movies like Suicide Squad. They've been trying to push him a lot to appear in movies as this like new sort of actor who can portray, you know, edgy characters, and I can never buy him. He was also in Terminator Genesis. I don't like him as an actor, but I didn't mind him that much here in A Good Day to Die Hard. He was actually doing better acting than Bruce Willis himself. Bruce Willis looked bored, but there's plenty of action in the movie and plenty of stuff that keeps me entertained while it's actually probably the shortest one in the series. I've seen worse entries in other franchises. This is a very passable movie. I did like a specific twist in the movie, even though I saw it coming from a mile away. It's short, it's to the point, a lot of action, never a dull moment in the movie. So that's that, A Good Day to Die Hard. Number 14. This is another movie that's dumb as hell. Probably even more dumb than A Good Day to Die Hard. And that movie is X-Men Origins Wolverine. I know you're going to click on the X on this video and say, fuck this guy, this movie is terrible. I like X-Men Origins Wolverine. What can I say? It has some terrible CGI, it has terrible acting, it has a lot of stupid shit, but I like this movie for its unintentional humor. There's so much stupid, over-the-top stuff going on that I can't help myself but watch it. They play this movie a lot on FX, and I own the movie on Blu-ray, and even if it's playing on TV, I'll watch it. It's very, very entertaining. Yes, I don't like what they did with Deadpool, even though, you know, Ryan Reynolds has gone on to make fun of it in Deadpool 2. I don't mind this movie. A lot of stuff doesn't make sense. They contradict themselves. The whole X-Men franchise makes very little to no sense because it always has different directors taking the helm, so they'll contradict other films in the franchise. So you have to make up shit in your head as to how it will all make sense in the linear timeline, even though it jumps from, you know, from the past to the future. If you were to watch all these movies in chronological order, they make no sense. Like, for example, in X-Men Days of Future Past, is it X-Men Days of Future Past? No, it's in X-Men First Class. There's a character named Emma Frost. And in X-Men Origins Wolverine, you have a character 20 years later who's also named Emma Frost and has the same powers as Emma Frost, but they're not the same person. That's the excuse that they gave. Inconsistencies like that, or inconsistencies like seeing Patrick Stewart appear in the 1980s looking like Patrick Stewart, and then you have movies like X-Men The Dark Phoenix having James McAvoy looking a lot younger. So things like that. But anyway, going back to the movie itself, everyone hates this movie because it doesn't make much sense. They bastardize the character of Deadpool. The action sequences are very dumb and the CGI is really, really bad, especially the claws on Wolverine. And there's one particular scene where Wolverine is breaking down the stairs and the CGI is really bad, even for 2008 or 2009 when this movie came out, because I recall this movie was leaked online without finished effects before it hit theaters, And even when they finish, the effects still look bad. So if you think the effects look bad now, they looked bad even back then. But even still, I enjoy this movie both ironically and non-ironically. Non-ironically in the sense that there's never a dull moment, so I'm always entertained by it. And ironically, because I laugh at a lot of the stupid shit. Especially all the macho stuff, it's just exposition followed by action, followed by exposition, followed by action. It's one of those dumb movies that, if it's playing on TV, I will watch it. So, number 14 was X-Men Origins Wolverine. Number 13 is another movie that is considered like a sin to say that you like. Because the first two movies in this trilogy are considered masterpieces. And I will even go as far as saying that part 2 is even better than part 1. But the movie that everyone hates, for the most part, is The Godfather Part 3. I don't hate this movie. I've seen it hundreds of times, and yes, it's nowhere near as good as the first two movies. Especially coming from Part 2, which is like one of the perfect crime movies. 3 is very, very inferior. But if you compare it to other crime movies, not that bad. Yeah, you have Sofia Coppola at the end, doing a terrible, terrible acting when she gets shot. Really poor choice of casting her. But I like the characters that they introduced. Andy Garcia, seeing the struggle with Michael Corleone, between, him, the path that he chose to become someone who is in the crime life. I liked the movie. I liked it, I've seen worse movies, I've seen terrible movies. This is nothing that bad. I don't get, unlike the other two movies I mentioned, I know why people don't like A Good Day Die Hard. I know why people don't like X-Men Origins Wolverine. But this is a movie that baffles me because I get it, The Godfather 1 and 2 are immaculate. They're perfect. They really have no inconsistencies or errors. They're movies that, even for someone who wants to get into filmmaking, they should watch. Because it has great editing, it has great cinematography, it has great acting, a lot of good things. The third one, yes, it is more inferior, but it's a great conclusion. If you watch all three movies, it makes sense how he got to where he is at the end. Spoilers if you haven't seen The Godfather Part 3, but it makes sense why he ends up, alone. And it's a lonely life when, you are in this type of lifestyle. Yeah, number 13 was The Godfather Part 3. Number 12. Number 12 is a movie that, just like The Godfather Part 3, is a third film in a series. This one, I kind of get why people don't like it. And that movie is Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines. I like this movie. I would go as far as saying that this is a good successor to Terminator 2 Judgment Day. In many ways, I often will say that the best Terminator movies is 1 and 2. 1 and 2 are perfect. Those are James Cameron's best work. 3 was not directed by James Cameron. It was directed by Jonathan Mostow, who I believe directed U-571. And at the time, James Cameron praised Part 3. And I had no clue that people hated this movie so much. It wasn't until a couple of years ago that I started seeing a lot of people saying how much they hate this movie. And yes, if you watch Part 3 after Part 2, you're going to notice that it has a similar plot line. Terminator fans will always say it's Terminator 1 and 2. And I sometimes do say that, but to be frank, from now on, I'll say Terminator's a trilogy. I like Terminator 1, 2, and 3. 3 really closed the storyline. For those who've seen the movie, when you see John Connor and his future wife in that bunker as the survivors, and the bombs start falling, it comes full circle. It's Judgment Day is inevitable. But whenever I watch the Terminator movies, it's usually 1, 2, and 3. And then sometimes I'll watch Salvation, but I'll never watch Genesis, and I'll fucking never watch Dark Fate. That movie was awful. So yeah, number 12 was Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines, a movie that I like, but I know a lot of people hate. Number 11 is a movie that some people hate and others like ironically. I like this movie unironically. And I know it's hard to believe because this movie was mentioned last year a lot by people who have been comparing it to The Room. And I can't compare it to The Room. Because The Room, for those who haven't seen The Room, Tommy Wiseau's classic masterpiece of crap that is hilarious. It's unintentionally hilarious. This movie is nothing like The Room. And that movie is The Fanatic. Number 11 is The Fanatic, starring John Travolta. If you haven't seen this movie, basically John Travolta plays someone who obsessed with this action star. And he will go as far as stalking him and doing things he shouldn't do just to get an autograph and to get his attention. Is this movie very generic? Yes. Does this movie have some unintentional laughs? Sure. But I wouldn't go as far as comparing it to The Room. I enjoyed the movie unironically. You know, I like some of the choices that John Travolta made for the character. Some of them are a little zany, and some of them are a little over the top, but it works for the character that he's playing. There are other people that generally hate the movie. They don't like the fact that the movie's very mean-spirited. You know, who are you supposed to root for? You're supposed to root for John Travolta's character, in a sense. But you have to put himself in his shoes. He's someone who doesn't understand how you're supposed to behave. You know, he just wants an autograph. He really likes his character, but he does go over the top, and he becomes someone who should have stopped, but he just doesn't understand. So, it's not great, but I like it. I own it on DVD. If I had come across it on Blu-ray, I would have picked it up on Blu-ray, but I don't do double dipping. If you haven't seen the video, there's a video where I talk about me not double dipping on movies. But yeah, I found it on DVD, and that's the movie that I have. And I liked it. So number 11 was The Fanatic with John Travolta. Number 10 is a movie that is universally considered one of the worst movies. I've seen this movie a couple of times, and I see this movie as a satire. I think this is a movie that was very misunderstood. And to this day, you know, I would tell people to give it a second watch. That movie is 1995's Showgirls, directed by Paul Verhoeven. If you're not familiar with Paul Verhoeven, he did movies like Robocop. He did movies like Hollow Man. He also directed movies like Starship Troopers. Some of the movies that I've just mentioned are satires, you know. Robocop, while it is a sci-fi action sort of movie, it's also a satire. If you watch Starship Troopers, yeah, it's a sci-fi horror kind of movie, but it's really a satire. Hollow Man is more of a derivative sci-fi horror movie. But Showgirls, you know, which a lot of people took too seriously, in my opinion, is also a satire. And I just don't get the hate. People used to quote this movie a lot back in the day. They used to quote a lot of the bad acting and the bad lines, but I don't see it as bad acting. I see it as part of the routine of these characters that they live in this type of world where it's all about exhibition and being over the top. So I think this is a movie that's very misunderstood. You know, I know a lot of people are going to disagree, but I generally think this is a good movie. I don't think it's bad. Number 10 is Showgirls. Give it a second watch. You know, I don't think this is as bad as people say it is. Number 9 is a movie that I also don't get why people hate so much. I understand that this particular third film was not rated R. It was rated PG-13. And yeah, it's more family friendly, but it still doesn't make it that bad. And yes, a particular actor did not come back. So that movie is Robocop 3. Robocop 1 is a classic directed by Paul Verhoeven. Like I mentioned, that movie is not just an action sci-fi movie, but it's also a satire. Part 2, which was not directed by Paul Verhoeven, I believe it was directed by Irvin Kershner, who directed The Empire Strikes Back, is more of a straightforward action sci-fi movie. And it's an underrated sequel, in my opinion. And I think most people like it. Part 3, on the other hand, was directed by the guy who did Night of the Creeps. And I don't think he's done much else since. The third film has very little violence. It's actually has no satire. There are some scenes that are trying to call back to the first movie, but the original actor who played Robocop didn't come back. It was replaced by a different actor. So I think the actor who plays Robocop isn't that bad, of course, you know. I don't think he's as good as the original actor, but he did a pretty good job. and actually continue the storyline from the first film, where they're planning to turn Detroit into the city where, pretty much everyone's poor. Kind of, ironic, because in today's modern world, Detroit is one of the poorest cities in the United States. So the movie has plenty of action. Yes, it doesn't have as much gore, has no gore in comparison to the first two movies, but I don't see why this movie is considered so bad. The only downside is that, the original actor didn't return. Outside of that, I can watch Robocop 3 all the time and have no problems with it. I know most people won't agree. I have friends who tell me, you're crazy, Robocop 3 is one of the worst movies that I've ever seen. I watch it and I have no problem with it. Honestly, I don't. So, yeah, Robocop 3. Number 8 is another third film. It's curious, a lot of third parts in a trilogy are hated by most people. And this one, a lot of people hate, probably even more than Robocop 3. Still haven't met anyone who likes this movie. Most people that I've met, they either hate it or they'll like certain things about it, but they won't really acknowledge this as a worthy sequel. Even the original director doesn't like it. And that movie is Alien 3. Here's a funny thing with the Alien franchise. Alien, great movie from Ridley Scott. It's a classic claustrophobic, it's kind of a slasher movie in space. It's really good. It's a quintessential classic. Aliens, James Cameron, turned it into an action sci-fi movie that's amazing. It still holds up to this day. And Alien 3 brought it back to its roots. And yes, I understand why people hate the movie. Because at the beginning of the film, if you haven't seen Aliens, spoilers, Newt and Ripley, who had, survived, and Michael Biehn's character, they're in a ship only for them to die in the opening of Alien 3. Yes, I understand that people, they express that, okay, all the stuff that she did in Aliens is now considered useless. All that whole last action sequence. I disagree. It's, in my opinion, it just makes it a little bit more realistic. Even for a sci-fi horror film. It just shows that sometimes life sucks. But the rest of the film is very, very good. It's a story that's very unique. I've never seen a sci-fi horror film take place in a futuristic prison, with these characters who are religious, and, seeing Ripley in a situation where she has to convince people of, the fact that there's an alien. And seeing the new type of alien, which comes from a dog, and I think in the alternate cut it comes from a pig. It's a good movie, I don't see anything wrong with it. Yes, it's not as good as the first two movies, but it's actually, in my opinion, way better than Alien Resurrection, way better than freaking Alien Covenant. That to me is the worst one. Number 7 is a movie that when it first came out, people liked it. Most people, would mention this movie saying that this is actually probably just as good as the original. But I don't know what happened, that in the subsequent years, people started disliking it more and more. Especially because they associate it with its sequel. And that movie is Rob Zombie's Halloween. When this movie first came out, I liked it. I didn't see anything wrong with it. It's nothing like the original John Carpenter movie. That's a classic. I at least give props to Rob Zombie for trying new things. Unlike the most recent Halloween movie, which I thought was just very mediocre, because all it did was just grab things from the original film and repackage it as something new. That's not. At least the Rob Zombie movie tried giving an explanation as to why he is evil. Even though it's kind of unnecessary, I still give him some props. I like Malcolm McDowell as Dr. Loomis. Scott Taylor Compton, who's freaking hot. I saw her once in person at a convention. They're great playing Laurie Strode. It's a different take on the whole story. And yes, Halloween 2, the sequel to this one, is very bad. That one I can't defend. That one, it's very problematic. It actually feels very much like a Rob Zombie music video. There are one or two scenes that I do like in the sequel, but the original film, the original, remake, I like the fact that, it's someone who's hugely built, and you get a backstory that, while kind of unnecessary, it's a nice take. But I don't understand why people actually hate the movie. Like, go as far as saying that this is one of the worst, movies in the Halloween franchise. You know, if anything, to me, one of the worst movies in the Halloween franchise is Halloween 6, the theatrical cut, that is. Well, actually, no, I would probably say it's Halloween Resurrection. Especially the scene where you have, you know, freaking Busta Rhymes saying, "Yo, Mikey, happy fucking Halloween," or "Trick or treat, motherfucker." Those scenes are awful. But the 2007 Halloween movie, on the other hand, has a lot of good stuff in it. Number 6 is a movie that I think was probably not marketed very well. And this movie plays more kind of like a romance. And I don't see it as a genuine, you know, horror movie. If anything, it's a drama, a romance, and with certain elements of horror. And that movie is The Village. It's funny because in the other list I mentioned Signs, which is probably my least favorite M. Night Shyamalan movie. But I really like The Village. You know, yeah, you know, the whole twist at the end felt a little bit forced and it's kind of dumb. But the rest of the film plays out very nicely. It has a great score by James Newton Howard. It has great acting by Joaquin Phoenix and the other actress, who I don't remember her name. She was in Jurassic World. They do a great job. You know, yeah, I understand the criticisms of, you know, if you haven't seen the movie, I don't want to ruin it, but people complain about the sounds these monsters make when you find out what they really are. You know, outside of that, you know, I don't have a problem with this movie. It's way better than Signs. It's way better than After Earth and The Last Airbender and Lady in the Water. I put it, you know, I don't put it up there with like The Sixth Sense, but it's pretty decent. It's very nicely shot. It's very nicely acted. So, The Village. Number 5 is a movie that I think most people have forgotten about it now, but for a long time it was considered Bruce Willis' worst movie. Funny because Bruce Willis now is making a lot of turds. A lot of them. You know, if you think A Good Day to Die Hard is bad, you know, you should watch movies like 10 Minutes Gone, Precious Cargo, Airstrike, The Prince, all these terrible movies that he releases direct-to-video. How do I know these titles? Because I actually have seen some of them. I am a Bruce Willis fan, and do keep an eye open because I want to be doing a video on Bruce Willis. But this particular movie, I don't think it's that bad. I think it's very misunderstood. And that movie is Hudson Hawk. This movie is a comedy, and people, you know, criticize this movie as being one of the worst movies ever. It's not supposed to be taken so seriously. It's a very lighthearted movie. It's very quotable and very entertaining. I think this is a movie that, if it were released today, it would probably get praised. I think it just was ahead of its time. You know, when it first came out, people criticized the whole absurdities that happen in the film. It kind of plays out in a sense, kind of like a Looney Tunes kind of thing. It's not meant to be taken that seriously. So, I don't know much else to say about it other than the fact that it's entertaining. It's not meant to be taken so seriously. So yeah, Hudson Hawk. Number 4 is a movie that, when it came out, people didn't like, and today people still don't like it. People probably like it even less. They consider it one of the worst movies to come out of the Marvel, not Marvel Universe, because it's not part of the MCU. It didn't exist at the time. It's just part of the Marvel brand. And that movie is Ang Lee's Hulk. I don't get the hate, you know. Yeah, the movie's a bit slow, and it's basically an origin story, and there are scenes that do drag. I actually do like the choice of making it into a comic book. I like Eric Bana. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't work, especially the last fight scene where you can't see much of what's going on, but I did like the origin story. I've seen worse movies with the Marvel brand in it. Movies like Fan Four Stick. That one's terrible. What's the Elektra movies even worse than that? I think this one's just very average. There's people also hate the whole fight scene that he has with the dogs. If anything, the CGI hasn't aged very well. But there are certain scenes with the actual Hulk that still look pretty good. I can't get myself to hate this movie. And I like the actor who played General Ross. Yeah, that's straight out of the comics. He did a great job. So, I'm not going to apologize for liking this movie. So, yeah. Hulk. Number 3 is a movie that I do meet a lot of people that like it. But I also meet just as many people who hate this movie. I met people who say this is the shit stain in the trilogy, and I disagree. I really do. Yeah, the movie has a lot of plot holes, but it's not bad. And that movie is The Dark Knight Rises. Very much like The Godfather, Batman Begins and The Dark Knight are perfect. Especially The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight is The Godfather 2 of that series. It's perfect. But The Dark Knight Rises is, in my opinion, a great closure to the series. And people shit on this movie all the time. They say so many negative things about it, and I just don't get it. Like I do get it, but at the same time, there's answers to your questions. Like people always mention, how the hell did, Bruce Wayne get the hell out of, buttfuck Egypt back to Gotham? And people say it's because he's Batman. Well, if you watch Batman Begins, he spent 8 years all over the world. He probably had resources and ways to get back to Gotham. Then the first thing people say, well, when we got back to Gotham, the first thing he did was do the bat symbol, instead of helping people. Heck, you don't know if he did that symbol way before, or if he had people do it for him. You have no clue. You don't know how long it was. And on top of that, people complain the fact that he healed really easily. He was 5 months in the pit. It took him a long time. And then, of course, people complain about the scene where the doctor, snaps the spine back into place. People, the Dark Knight trilogy is not supposed to be ultra-realistic. It's supposed to take place in a more real world, not in the actual real world. Most movies, if they took place in the real world, would be freaking boring. The Dark Knight movies are just meant to be a little bit more realistic. There's still going to be things that you have to suspend disbelief. Even when you watch The Dark Knight, there are scenes where you have to suspend disbelief. Specifically, scenes with the Joker where he escapes. How did he know specifically when the bomb in the guy's cell phone was going to explode? How did he know he was going to be in that jail cell right at that moment? You have to suspend disbelief. It's a movie. So with The Dark Knight Rises, you have to do the same thing. People also complain about the scene where they send all the cops down to the tunnel. That scene, I agree. It's a little dumb, and it doesn't make much sense. It's only there's a plot device so you can have the whole city defenseless. That scene, I do agree, is a little lazy. But the rest of the movie is good. I liked Tom Hardy playing Bane. I like the score by Hans Zimmer. The scenes that they shot with IMAX are great. It's a movie that I will always defend. And one of my best friends hates this movie. He says we always get into arguments about this movie. But I like it. And it has great themes. It have Bruce Wayne having to learn to be Batman again. And it closes the story of a man who became a symbol of hope and passed it on to someone else. And now can live happily ever after with Catwoman. So, I like it. This is going to start becoming a rant about The Dark Knight Rises. But yeah, I like this movie. I genuinely do like this movie a lot. Number 2 is another Batman movie, curiously enough. This movie, when I first saw it in theaters, I didn't like it. I'll admit. But it was because this particular version of the movie was bad. And that movie is Batman v Superman. There's even a review where I mentioned how much I disliked the movie. And that was because I saw an unfinished film. The theatrical cut is an unfinished film. It has so many problems, it makes little to no sense. It just jumps from scene to scene without any establishment. It's a nonsensical movie. It feels unfinished. It feels like a lot of stuff was removed. And it is true because you have the ultimate cut, which improves almost all the problems I have with the theatrical film. I don't think this movie's amazing. I'm not going to defend it as much as I did with The Dark Knight Rises, but there are things in it that I really like. I think Ben Affleck was good as Batman. He was a really good Bruce Wayne, too. I just think that he should have been given one more chance to do a solo Batman movie. This movie had too much stuff in it. It was not just a sequel to Man of Steel, but it was also establishing a solo Batman story. It was also establishing the Justice League. You had Doomsday. It had too much in it. But I do like a lot of the things in it, the intricacies of the plot. Even though at times it can be a little bit convoluted and kind of contrived, but I did like the way that it plays out. Yeah, the fight scene between Batman and Superman is very one-sided and it's very short for a movie that's nearly 3 hours long. But there are things, especially towards the first, I would say the first hour, hour and a half of the movie, I'm very interested. And I'm also interested in seeing the scenes where Clark is actually being an investigative reporter, which you don't see much in the other Superman movies. What I don't like, obviously, is all of the last half of the movie where it just becomes a typical Zack Snyder shit show. I don't hate this movie as much as, like, let's say, Justice League. Justice League is terrible. I can't defend that movie. That movie is pure junk. I would say it's probably one of the worst comic book movies I've ever seen. Batman v Superman is a movie that a lot of people hate, but I will defend. You know, it's not perfect, and you have scenes like Martha, you know, that scene, you know, it's very, very dumb, you know, the way they end the fight scene, but it's not as terrible as people say. You know, give it a second chance. You know, I know you would have to spare 3 hours to watch it, but it's not as bad as people say. I've seen worse movies coming from DC. One in particular that comes to mind is Catwoman. That movie's terrible. That one I cannot defend. But BVS I can defend. It's the Ultimate Edition, that is. But what can be number one? What's the number one movie that I like that everyone else hates? So here's the funny thing about this particular movie I'm about to mention in this list. When I first saw this movie, I was very upset. I was with most of the people that to this day still say this is one of the worst movies in this particular franchise. And I have watched it in subsequent times, and I don't think this movie is amazing. I think this movie has a lot of problems, but I like it. You know? Heck, I even like it more now, in retrospect, in comparison to the most recent film that they've added into the franchise. And that movie is Star Wars The Last Jedi. So Star Wars The Last Jedi is a movie that, for the most part, I've seen so many videos on YouTube, people like criticizing the shit out of this movie, and there are things that I do agree with it, but most of it I find very, very silly, especially for this type of movie. Like, this franchise has the worst set of fans, because all the criticisms that were given by people on Reddit and Tumblr, or all people on the interwebs, all your criticisms, I get it to a certain degree, but it's so funny that all the problems that you wanted to be eliminated came true. You got Star Wars Rise of Skywalker. That movie, in my opinion, is terrible. It's one of the worst movies in the franchise. When I saw Star Wars Rise of Skywalker, I actually thought, hey, this is just very average. You know, it's fine. But I've since rewatched it. It's hot trash. Star Wars Rise of Skywalker is hot trash. That's a movie that is very committee. It's a movie that's a checklist. It's, okay, let's undo everything that The Last Jedi did. As much as I have problems with The Last Jedi, I honestly can watch this movie feeling as it's a complete closure of the story. It's a complete closure of the Skywalker story and moving forward into something new. I liked the fact that, you know, she's a nobody. She's just a nobody. You don't have to be tied to the Obi-Wan family or the Skywalker family or the Palpatine family in order to have powers and abilities in the Force. If anything, if you were to do that, which is what they did, they made the Star Wars universe that much smaller. By doing what they did instead with The Last Jedi, you're expanding the universe to more new stories, but it just shows that people like more of the same. That's why you have so many reboots and remakes. That's why people love them, even though they say they don't. We're going to keep getting more remakes and reboots in the future because people love to watch the same shit. So, Last Jedi is a movie that, watching it now, you know, I like the fact that they were trying to do something different. Killing off Snoke, initially I didn't like it, but come to think of it, the idea was killing off the past. Why does it have to be the same story of an emperor manipulating a young person? Kill him off, and actually that's kind of what they all do. The people, the learners, the apprentice always kills their master. And he became, the idea was for him to become the main villain. He was actually probably the most interesting thing in the whole trilogy. Kylo Ren, played by Adam Driver, he did a great job. So I like this movie. I don't love it. There's a lot of things I don't like. I don't like a lot of the stuff they did with Luke. I wish that we had seen Luke doing more powers and more things within the Force. But it's a movie that's very non-offensive for the most part. You know, there are certain things, of course, that I also don't like. Like, I don't like the whole scene where Laura Dern goes into light speed and she crashes all those ships. I thought that scene was dumb. And I also don't like the Canto Bite scene. But everything else, for the most part, you know, it works. It works as a movie that was trying to expand into new stories instead of retreading into the whole same story that we've seen hundreds of times. But I'm going to talk about that in another video. Anyway, guys, these are the 15 movies that I like that, for the most part, everyone else hates. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what are some movies that you like that most people don't like. Leave it in the comment section below, and I will see you guys next time. Take care.